To say that the year 2020 was an eventful year would be an understatement. Right off the bat in January, Taal Volcano erupted and spewed ash that affected not only the province of Batangas, but also adjacent provinces in the Calabarzon region as well as Metro Manila. Typhoons also ravaged parts of the country, resulting in massive flooding and landslides that seized lives, damaged properties and livelihood, and displaced thousands. Towards the tail end of the year, the provinces of Cagayan and Isabela endured the worst flood in 4 decades in their area due to Typhoon Ulysses. Some say Filipinos are seasoned survivors of natural disasters, with a geographical location of the Philippines that makes it vulnerable to fierce storms, as well as volcanic eruptions and strong earth movements. But no one was prepared enough for a damning health crisis that would most likely bend the course of their lives: the COVID-19 pandemic. It was on the afternoon of January 30 when the Department of Health announced the first case of the new coronavirus disease, or COVID-19, in the Philippines. The Chinese tourist traveled to the Philippines from Wuhan, China, via Hong Kong on January 21. By January 25, the woman was seeking treatment for a mild cough. Wuhan was where SARS-CoV-2, the newest coronavirus strain that causes severe respiratory ailment COVID-19, was first detected late last year. 11 months later, COVID-19 cases in the Philippines swelled to more than 460,000.
I cannot measure the impact. This pandemic has brought the whole world down to its knees, and we are no exception. So, but we have shown our resilience. It took some time, but the important thing is, where are we today? Dapat kasi when we start comparing, we cannot be comparing lang absolute numbers. For example, 450,000 tayo, we're number 27, number 28, wow, blah, blah. And yet, yun nga, from number 18 tayo, we're down to 27. So, ang laking leap doon, ano? Na bumaba tayo in terms of absolute count. But if you situate or contextualize the number of cases to the population, mababa yung ating attack rate.
As of Christmas Day, the Philippines recorded more than 467,000 COVID-19 infections nationwide. While a huge number of patients were able to recover from the illness, COVID-19 has also killed over 9,000 in the country, and the figure continues to increase. It is also important to note that there may be cases that remain undetected and unreported to this day. Since March, the government imposed a string of health protocols, such as wearing of face masks and observance of social distancing at the least, as well as strict lockdowns in a bid to curb the virus transmission. The health secretary notes that the country has already gone a long way from the early onset of the outbreak, as the government has now beefed up the number of COVID-19 testing laboratories and isolation centers.
Certainly, after 9 months or 10 months, no, marami na tayong natutunan, ano? And we are not defenseless. Yun ang gusto kong i-underscore. We are not defenseless.
The impact of the pandemic, however, is not only limited to the health sector, as it likewise generally altered many aspects of how people live their lives. Lockdowns, aimed at making person-to-person interaction almost not to avoid virus transmission, modified how workers do their jobs and how students learn. The peaking COVID-19 epidemic in the country came at a time when the education sector was to prepare for school year 2020-2021. Eventually, the government decided to forego classrooms and go for distance learning that is mostly online. Authorities chose the experimental approach despite the nation's enduring problem on poor connectivity and digital infrastructure.
The COVID-19 was not like any other uh, disaster that we have faced in recent years. And you know that we have faced so many natural and man-made disasters that have disrupted the education system, but nothing as deep and as broad as COVID-19 imposed on us. We had to also embark on the preparations for a totally different learning delivery modality, one that takes us away from the classroom to the safety and comfort of the homes of the learners, but it is not easy to be able to do that. So how do you deliver learning remotely under the challenges of technology and all of that?
Let our classes begin!
On October 5, school year 2020-2021 opened under remote learning via the internet, TV, or radio, or what the Department of Education has termed as blended learning, which is a combination of distance learning and learning through using printed modules. Somewhat expectedly, the reopening of classes this year was met with a number of issues, such as insufficient printed modules, lack of access to gadgets and technology, as well as the internet, among others.
Siguro kung normal po, mas kumbaga parang mas napakadali pong i-address yung problema ng mga estudyante sa loob ng classroom. Kasi kumbaga parang on hand, parang kaya mo silang kausapin directly para, ayun po. And then siguro po kung online, medyo hirap po talaga talagang kailangan nating busisiin pa kung ano ba yung mga kinakaharap ng mga estudyante natin. Feeling ko kasi, sir, mahalaga po talagang malaman yung condition nila eh. Kasi hindi lang po ito usapin ng pagkatuto nila, kundi ano po yung mga bagay na nakakapekto po din sa pag-aaral nila. Yung mga bagay na kailangan po nating i-address ay unang-una, siguro yung mga sapat na kagamitan para sa mga kabataan. Kung gadget man yan, kailangan makapag-provide tayo ng gadget sa mga kabataan. At yung siguro yung tulong financial din. Kasi marami po talaga sa kabataan yun. Kahit sabihin natin na kailangan po talaga nilang tumulong sa pamilya.
It was not an easy, aside from that, is the communication challenge or the debates that are happening publicly within public institutions, in media platforms, in Congress. So all of this had to be done at the same time and such a short period of time. And so we felt that it is really a big challenge that we had to face at the time, just to be able to still continue with the mandate of government to provide access to education to our children and youth.
And as anticipated, the country's economy also took a hit from the global public health crisis because businesses, mostly the micro, small, and medium enterprises, had to stop operations for at least 3 months due to quarantine restrictions imposed by the government. Data from the Department of Trade and Industry show that there are 1.5 million registered MSMEs in the country, making up more than 99% of the businesses in the Philippines. Of these 1.5 million MSMEs, 38% had to close down at the start of the lockdown. By November, 5% of MSMEs in the country remain closed.
The impact sa mga companies, especially micro SMEs, ay malaki pa din. Kahit ngayon may 5%, mga 75,000 more or less, yan pa rin yung mga sarado. And so may malaking tama in terms of yung mga sarado na micro SMEs. You know the big numbers in terms of GDP. It worsened to minus 16.5, whereas pre-COVID, positive 6.5, 6.6 tayo percent. So we're the second fastest growing. But with the lockdown, again, it dropped to minus 16.5. But over time, over the months, when we were reopening, we started to see signs of recovery. And that's when that 16 minus 16.8 minus 16.8, nag-improve na ng kaunti sa minus 11.5%.
We are all about to reach a year on rigid coronavirus curbs, and the world has not ceased its war against COVID-19. However, there seemed to be a silver lining on the horizon, with the rollout of vaccines to hopefully stomp out the pandemic. The United Kingdom recently made history when a 90-year-old British grandmother became the first person in the world outside clinical trials to be inoculated with the COVID-19 vaccine. The jab used was developed by American drug maker Pfizer and German biotechnology firm BioNTech SE, which claims a 95% accuracy to defeat the potentially deadly coronavirus. In the Philippines, the government hopes to vaccinate 60 to 70% of the population, which it deems enough to trigger herd immunity within 3 to 5 years.
Moving forward, 2021, it's really the narrative is about the vaccine. No? So this is what we are preparing for. Is the negotiations are ongoing with the different vaccine manufacturing companies and guided by the absolute requirement of safety, efficacy, practicability of implementation.
With the vaccine rollout, kasabay ng vaccine rollout, syempre yung confidence level ng ating public. And then of course, pick up ng business yan. Magpipick up yung business dun sa mga areas na may rollout ng vaccine. Which is why, ang magiging priority, I believe, would be areas na mataas yung local transmission ng COVID. Because these are areas where necessarily we have to we understand that we have to get, because of the restrictions in those areas, we have to get people back to work. Kumbaga. So, kaya yun yung mga priorities.
But even as talks are ongoing for the government's procurement of COVID-19 shots, President Rodrigo Duterte himself admitted that the Philippines seems to be, quote, second fiddle in the race to secure enough vaccine doses compared to rich nations.
Parang second fiddle nga tayo. It's because yung mga mayaman na doon pag ginagawa sa kanila ang vaccine, kaya ng Pfizer, uunahin talaga ang Amerika. There's no such available vaccine sa Pfizer ngayon. Wala silang maibigay. Ginagamit nga sa Amerika. Kinukuha.
Nevertheless, hopes remain high that with a possible rollout of mass vaccination within the first half of 2021, the country will gradually be back on its feet. According to COVID-19 Policy Chief Implementer and Vaccine Czar Carlito Galvez Jr., the first coronavirus vaccine that the Philippines could obtain will likely come from China. He said vaccine developed by China's Sinovac Biotech may arrive as early as first quarter of next year, as well as the Sputnik V made by Russia's Gamaleya Research Institute. He also said that Pfizer's vaccine will possibly arrive in the country between the second and third quarter of 2021. Despite this, however, Education Undersecretary Malaluan said it might be too early to predict if there will be changes in the nation's prevailing mode of learning by then.
Will this still be the same modality? We are not certain about that yet. Our present school year will end in early June. And so there is already an adjustment in the school calendar. And the COVID situation is quite fluid. It is not something that we can predict as to its status. There are so many contingent variables. Not any country can really foresee it within a time horizon. But what is certain is that the experience that happened in this school year will change the terrain of education sector in the future, even post-COVID, because there are so many aspects that we have been compelled to do in response to this pandemic that can actually be extended beyond or even post-COVID. The use of technology, for example, the blending of face-to-face and distance learning. Uh, there are so many transformative, and it's happening in the education sector, not only in the Philippines but in other countries and globally.
As for Trade Secretary Ramon Lopez, he is hopeful that 2021 will be a year of growth for the country's economy and businesses.
Sabi nga natin, life goes on. We have to really reopen para mabalik yung trabaho sa ating mga kababayan. Kasi kung hindi, maraming maghihirap at magugutom, magkakasakit. At babalik din sa health problem itong kahirapan at kagutuman at malnourishment and impact sa education. So talaga yung drive natin ever since mga May, June, ay unti-unting maibalik yung mga trabaho by opening the sectors. At the only guarantee or at least precaution that we had been doing is i-instill yung ating mga minimum health protocol. In fact, we issued even yung mga workplace health protocol. In-issue po natin with DOLE and DOH and DILG at tulong-tulong mga ahensya pati LGUs sa implement to ensure compliance ng mga workplace protocols. We can expect a better 2021, definitely better than 2020 because as mentioned, as we have reopened economy and we shall continue to do so, the fact that nag-improve ang ating mga health statistics despite the reopening at kaya panayang paalala natin sa ating mga kababayan, dito sa pag-improve na ito, this is the one that will allow us to reopen further.
We need more economic activity, no? But when we make our decisions, it has to be data-driven and science-based. We're looking at the possibilities also of a phase-by-phase approach in terms of pagluluwag sa age restrictions. No promises, but it's something that necessarily has to pass through the IATF for discussion and for consultation also with the different LGUs. No?
A recent Pulse Asia survey showed that against the backdrop of an ongoing pandemic, 91% of Filipinos will still face 2021 full of hope. This fairly reflects the usual perspective of many Filipinos in the face of an incoming brand new year, which, for them, also means brand new opportunity. Perhaps, for 2021 in particular, the vaccine against COVID-19 depicts a Filipino's hope that next year's things will be back to normal, that next year will be better.